Hi, everyone. Hoping that you all are doing well. Between the set revelations and the pan revelations, it looks like it's time to move in another direction on to some things that are important and relevant in current times. So, what we're going to address is this dynamic of the bully pulpit and the use of the bully pulpit in order to influence and condition the population, not just the local or national population, but the global population. So, whoever is observing this dynamic. Now, a bully pulpit generally refers to a space wherein an individual is given license to talk or to be heard. And so just about anything can be a bully pulpit with respect to social media, for instance. However, with respect to Congress, it also serves as a bully pulpit, not just a space to talk, but a space for bullies. And so when individuals want to engage in bullying, and they can use that space as the pulpit. And that's what we've seen with respect to the treatment of these colleges and universities. So we see this bully pulpit dynamic going on. Again, we are referring to bullying people in this particular space based upon a theory or a belief or an actuality that these various university presidents not living up to their responsibilities with respect to all of their students, faculty, and staff. However, that's not exactly what was going on with respect to the response to it. And so the response to it is what we see as this odd dynamic that is tied into learning theory and conditioning. And so on the surface, it looks like this was about a complaint about discrimination and maltreatment. But if you step away from that for a moment and you look at the dynamics, you see that this was more about conditioning the public than it was about doing something right for the students or these campuses. And so we're going to look into what that's all about. And it's rooted in social psychology and it's rooted in learning theory. Now, it's important for you to pay attention to this because this dynamic has become pervasive and it's become very obvious in terms of its proliferation. And so there is a pattern going on now among a number of patterns that's related to learning theory. And according to learning theory, behavioral learning theory, people learn based upon experience. People learn based upon conditioning. And so right now, what we've been seeing over the past year is this conditioning dynamic related to a number of issues. And we saw this in Congress. And so what was happening was these individual presidents of these universities were being brought in, they were being questioned, they were essentially being harassed, okay? They were being bullied themselves in this process. And so what took place was they were responding to what was taking place and then doing certain things in response. The other part of learning theory, however, is that the public was watching this. And the idea behind learning theory or behavioral learning theory is that the public will also respond to this dynamic that's being witnessed. And so the idea behind learning theory is that we learn as human beings by observation. And so we see something, we learn from watching the thing that we see, what we should do and what we should not do. Now, all of this is based upon paradigms related to punishment and reinforcement. And so, according to the theory, if we see two people interacting and one person behaves in a particular manner and the other person rewards them with something, they give them something nice in relation to the behavior. What we learn, or what we're supposed to learn according to the theory, is that that's a good behavior to emulate because it's going to come with a reinforcer. And a reinforcer is basically something that's given to someone to encourage them to continue the behavior. However, if we witness someone, as in what we witnessed up on Capitol Hill with respect to these presidents, if we witness someone doing something and then the response is something punitive, either they are subjected to something aversive or something is taken away from them, then what we learn is that that is behavior that should not be repeated because that behavior is going to come with a punitive response. And so what's supposed to happen in theory is that the person who is subjected to the reinforcement is supposed to then repeat the behavior. The person who is subjected to the punishment is supposed to decrease the behavior. And then there is this vicarious component. And so for those of us who are watching this circus, we are supposed to, according to the theory, learn which behaviors are to be repeated and which behaviors are to be stopped. And so, in other words, if you don't want to be treated the way these presidents were treated, then you would not do anything related to what they were accused of doing. And so, therefore, that's that vicarious punishment. Learning vicariously, learning through observing other people and what happens to other people. And so this dynamic served a couple of purposes. For one, it served as a deterrence. And this is yet another theory, deterrence theory, usually applied to crime. And so with respect to deterrence theory, the idea is that not only will the individuals who were bullied up on Capitol Hill not continue in the behavior, that's that specific deterrent. And so it was to stop them specifically. So not only will they not engage in the behavior again, according to the theory, but there's also a general deterrence, meaning that people generally will not engage in the behavior based upon the punishment of the individual who was initially subjected to the punitive behavior. And so therefore you have a specific deterrence and you have a general deterrence. Now this general deterrent is pretty wide. It's a really wide net being cast because it has been observed on social media for the entire world to see. And so there's this message going on indicating that if you do anything that remotely resembles what these presidents have done or have not done, you will likely suffer a similar fate. And so with respect to general deterrence, the first entities that would be responding to this and seeing themselves in the shoes of these presidents being bullied up on Capitol Hill would be the presidents of other universities and colleges, particularly those universities and colleges that would be considered in terms of the ladder, lower on the ladder, because the colleges and universities that were invited to the bully pulpit, these are seen as the head, the intellectual heads of the nation, okay? And so therefore, if it can happen to them, then it can definitely happen to those that are lower on the totem pole. Okay? And so there's a message being conveyed to multiple audiences just by the bullying of these particular university presidents. And so when you bully Columbia, you bully Harvard, you bully Yale, basically everyone else is expected to fall in line if they don't want to receive the same treatment. And everyone else is supposed to get the message that they are nothing compared to these entities. And if these entities can get it, everybody can get it. Now, as we wrap this up, I want to point out a couple of things. And this has to do with buying into things. And sometimes people buy into things without thinking about the future repercussions. Okay. And so during a particular administration, people may be led to believe that certain behaviors are okay or acceptable. Those things may be pushed. They might get really excited about it, not recognizing that it is setting a precedent for something else in the future. And so, with respect to, we'll just use these liberal and conservative dynamics, this dichotomy. There were things that were pushed during the liberal control of the situation that served to silence people. Okay. And it served to silence a particular group of people. And hopefully you were paying attention because we've addressed it before. And so the particular group of people silenced during that time were individuals who would be classified as white and male. Mm-hmm. And so the lesson you were supposed to learn from that was, if in a situation wherein those who are identified as white and male can be silenced, then anybody can get it. And so then you switch things around, and the other side, if you will, decides to use that former buy-in, because that was buy-in to silence people, to censor people. Remember? And so because people bought into that then, they were already of that spirit. That's why it's very difficult for people to get reparations, because some of the things that came about that resulted in the harm, some people really buy into some of it. And so when you think about enslavement and whipping and things like that, some people believe in beating children. And so therefore there's some buy-in to that. And so it's really hard to assert a belief in not buying into it when it has already been accepted. And so let's go back to this congressional situation. And so there was a prior situation where there was punishment for speaking out or having an opinion or being of a particular demographic. And people were really on board with it. And it was under this fake umbrella known as DEI. And some people thought DEI was just for them. DEI was a game. DEI was not real. That's why at the first opportunity, all of these entities, all of these companies, these schools, they dropped DEI like a hot potato, okay? It was fake. That's why. Okay, but it served a purpose. It got people to buy into the silencing of certain people. And so now here it comes back around. Another silencing game. However, this time it's a script flip. And so what we have now is people, many people bought into the silencing, the censoring, the First Amendment violations. And now they see where that has led. So it was a game in the beginning, and it was a game that was taking us here to this Hegelian situation that we are dealing with. And so what happened on Capitol Hill with respect to Congress and what is continuing to happen is a continuation of the violation of the First Amendment. Okay, so not only are there some free speech violations, but there are also violations that no one seems to want to talk about related to establishment, the Establishment Clause. There are dynamics going on with all of these situations that indicate that collectively people must buy into a particular religion. And yes, it is the Abrahamic religions, if you will. And so not buying into the Abrahamic narratives, the Abrahamic paradigms, not buying into those things has created a situation wherein individuals are being penalized. And so by doing that, it serves to show that Congress is essentially establishing a religion that everyone must buy into. Okay, so there are a number of dynamics going on with this situation, and that's also a part of this learning theory and this conditioning. People are being conditioned to buy into or to observe a particular religious paradigm. To be clear, this is going on outside of Congress. And so a number of things that we are taking in from the media in general, these things are also serving as conditioning types of dynamics. And so we are vicariously learning by observing other people in the media. And so we have to be very conscious about what it is that we are taking in, particularly when it comes to these influencers and these spiritual leaders and these political pundits. We have to be very mindful of what it is we are taking in, because a great deal of it is manipulation. And even with respect to social media, you have to remember that this stuff is algorithmic. And so if you are saying something or doing something that the algorithm wants to have said and done, then you will be rewarded for that. If you don't do that, then you will be punished. And so the individual content creators will learn. That's that specific deterrence. And then the ones observing or participating in the dynamic, they will also learn. They will see by observation the punishment and the reinforcement. And of course, most people want to be in a space of reinforcement. And so therefore, they are generally going to do the thing that's going to get them a reward. But remember, all of this is about conditioning and these paradigms of learning and how you get people to do whatever it is that you want people to do. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.